Hello students, in this video I'm going to go over the final review for CIS30C, which covers Unit 1 through 14 or Chapter 1 through 14. So as you can find the Canvas page, your final review is posted here in its final review module. I will add the video to this particular module, so make sure that you click on this to find the document, and you can watch the video and go along with the final review, or you can try to answer the question by using your notes, your book chapters, and your lab and assignments. So to begin, we are going to go over the first few questions, which is from Unit 1, and Unit 2. I try to follow the order of the unit. So in the first question, it asks you to fill in the blank. The blank are the low-level threads that do not allow user interaction, and that's your kernel level thread. There are two types of threads. There's the kernel level thread, and there's the user level thread, which answer number 2. What type of threads are considered high-level threads that allow the user interaction? So user level thread. So on the kernel level thread, this is low level, and this is usually belong to system or protected area of the system, compared to the user level thread that would be the threads that can be incorporated at the high level or for the applications. So make sure that we know the difference between the two. For number 3, it asks you what type of modules is used to implement processes in concurrent programming, and that will be your multiprocessing. Now, there are a few Python modules that can be used, but in the units, we talked about how multiprocessing can be implemented for concurrent programming, where we can create objects that would be representing processes and be able to incorporate processes in the program. Number 4, what Python module allows the user to interact with the interpreter and contains information related to execution progress, update by interpreter, and series of functions and low-level objects? That will be your Sys module. And the Sys module is mentioned throughout the chapters in this particular semester, because Sys module allows us to use the operating system and the system objects to invoke functions at the low level. So Sys module for number 4. Number 5, what Python module is used to access different functions in the operating system, and we would use OS module. And this can be used for PC, Linux, and Mac OS. So using this module, we can invoke functions for commands, and we can issue certain commands specifically for that version of the operating system. Number 6, it asks you to refer to the below script and describe the output. So when we look at this script, we know that it uses the OS module, and we have an object called pwd, and we're using getCwd method with the OS module. So with that, we are able to access the current working directory. That's what CWD stand for. In the second part of the program, we're using a container called list directory, and we are going to use listdir or listdir to provide the content of that directory. And with that, we would need to iterate through using a for loop. So we would iterate through the container to be able to print out the content of the current working directory. So number 6 program, it's simply display the current working directory, which is the folder that you are navigating to, or you're currently accessing, and its content, which are files and folders. For number 7, it asks you which Python module is used to determine the operating system of the of the computer or the system. That will be your platform module. And we often use platform module to determine which OS version or what OS we're using. You can also use other type of Python module, as we talked about how we can use OS walk and so on. But platform module is often the preferred module for operating system identification. For number 8, it asks you to refer to the below script and explain the purpose of popen method. And in this script, we're using subprocess, which is the module. So we import in subprocess on line 1. Second line, we're going to import in Sys Module. And this program is designed to ping www.google.com. So we're pinging that domain. And here we can see that we define an object called P, and this is a subprocess object, and we use the popen superclass to be able to issue the command to the domain. So ultimately, popen allows us to start a new process that runs the ping command, which is passed into the parameter on the target domain. And in this case, that will be google.com. Number 9, when using zip file Python module, which method is used to return the file names inside the zip folder? And we would use yield. And so when you import in a zip file module for Python, you would invoke yield method to be able to provide the names of the files inside the zip folder. We would need to, of course, open the content of the zip file and then be able to iterate through that container to access each of the file names. You can see the example in your notes for the zip file or the documentation. Number 10, fill in the blank. The blank are the domain components that are used by OS to interact with the network, and that will be your sockets. So sockets are used for communication particular to the service and the protocols. In order to connect to your servers or system on the network, we need to establish sockets, which are components of the OS that we can use to interact with the network. And as we know that network uses different protocol for different services, so in order for our servers to be connected, we have to establish or create the socket. Which brings us to number 11. Using socket Python module, what method is used to create the socket? And we simply, when we import in socket, we simply use the socket method. So therefore we would write it as socket.socket to be able to create a socket. So for 11, we would say that it will be socket module. Number 12, using socket Python module, define the type of socket. So when we're using TCP socket, when we're using socket module, we simply use sock stream for TCP. And for UDP, which is user datagram protocol, these sockets uses sock dgram. And for Unix sockets, this would be AF Unix. So that's different on what type of socket that you need to establish for what different type of systems, and also different type of services in the protocol that you're handling. For number 13, it asks you what type of sockets are used to access communication protocols using layer 3 network and layer 4 transport protocol. That will be your sock raw. So the raw sockets are used for communication from network layer and above, which is transport. So in the case that if you need to establish a socket for routing, socket for transport level, you would use sock raw, and provided the documentation for sock raw in the notes as well. Number 14, what package is used for packet manipulation, such as forging or decoding packets of various protocol? And we talked about Scapy. And in some of the other CIS30, like CIS30B class, there I wrote instructions around how to use Scapy, but Scapy is very popular in how we would use this to capture packets and manipulate packets in the case if you want to perform pen testing using packet modification. 15, describe the purpose of the below script. So when you look at the script, it uses the socket module. We import in socket. Then in the second line, we have an object called S, and this object is used to store the created socket. And when we look at this, we know that this is a TCP as it uses sock stream. And this is the AFINet, which is used for IP version 4. And then our target host is the domain name or URL, which is google.com. We are using the port 80, which is HTTP. And after we establish the socket and specify the connection elements of the socket, we would connect to the socket using connect method. And in order to connect on HTTP level, we need to do a GET. And so therefore the server would respond. So we would do a GET target host and to be able to send the request with the encoding. And the next line after the send method, we want to specify the byte size for our data on what we want to receive. Then we're going to print out the information and the length of our data and then close the socket. So simply in the script, we know that it is used to connect the client to the domain google.com, which is an HTTP server, using the HTTP port 80. And we want to display the data length and close the connection when we finish. Number 16 asks, what type of actions allow the user to gain access to shell of an external server that will be reverse shell? And we want to pay attention to this because there's security elements or there's needed protection for how we are using shell with our script to be able to execute certain things. Number 17, using socket module, what Python method is used to map a service name and a protocol name to a port number. And when we use the socket module, we are going to use get serve by name method, which allows us to map service name to protocol name and port number. For 18, it asks you to look at the script that's provided below. We have socket module being imported along with the Sys module. We have a function or a method called check port socket. And in its parameter, we're using an IP and port list. Here, we are going to try and except for exception handling. We're going to enumerate through the port list. We establish the socket. And this is going to be a TCP socket. We set the timeout. It would be 5 for the value. And we are going to connect through the port. If it is 0, then we are going to look at the open port. Otherwise, we're going to print the closed port. And then after that, we are going to close the socket. Then for the second part, which is the exception handling, we're going to handle the socket error. So in the case that it runs, if it runs and come across the error, we are going to print out the error in string and display connection error and then exit. Now we're going to call on the method by using check port socket, which is previously defined at the beginning. And we're going to use the local host, which is our target system, and the port number 21, 22, 80, 80, and 443. So this script is designed to scan port 21, 22, 80, 80, and 443 then display the open or closed ports on the local host. Number 19, determine the status of HTTP server based on the code values. So if you received 100 status code, that's informational. 200 status code, that is connection successfully. Connection is established successfully. 300 is a redirection to another URL. 400 is client connection error. And 500 is server connection error. So, and under this, we might have different value that falls under each group. So we want to make sure that we understand different status code, meaning on how the server would respond to the client. 20, using http.client module, what method is used to return information, requested resource data, response, and metadata? And we would use get response method. Using this module, we can simply use this method to be able to provide request and resource information when the client is connecting to the HTTP server. There are other modules that we can use for HTTP connection or establish connection with the server, be able to get some response and request information. This is one of the modules that we have implemented in or viewed in our exercises and our lecture. 21, what Python module is used to interact with HTTP-based API, and we can simply use request module. 22, which of the following statement is not true? A, Tor hides location of the users who are browsing the web. B, Tor encrypts browsing traffic by mixing it with other traffic. C, Tor hides IP address of the visited websites from ISP. D, Tor uses additional services of DNS for anomaly and protection. E, Tor requires server connections which are used to encrypt traffic from the source to the destination. So A through D are correct statement. E is the answer for number 22 as it is incorrect. Tor is able to give you privacy in browsing the web. It encrypts traffic by mixing in other traffic. It hides the IP address. It also uses additional services to block the DNS information or protect it. So E is the answer for 22. 23. When using Tor, what is used to connect to Tor when traffic is blocked by ISP? We would use a bridge relay, and bridge relay is not listed in the inventory list for Tor at the beginning. So bridge relay is the answer for 23. 24, what is stored on Exonaria? And that will be your IP addresses of the node relays. 25, what is used to identify active hidden services before requests can be made in the Tor network? And we would use onion off. 26, when using Tor, what tool is used to monitor and track deep web sites, whether they are anonymous or has vulnerability in privacy and anonymity? That will be Onion Scan. We would use this tool to be able to monitor our Tor connection. 27, which search engine is used for internet connected devices, IoT and server? We can use Shodan. We went over a couple search engine, but Shodan predominantly was addressed in the lecture in the lab. Shodan stands for Sentient Hyper Optimized Data Access Network. And this can be used via another browser, connecting to it, and also we can implement extension and so on. 28, when using Shodan module, what method is used to find the information about public connected devices? In Shodan module, we can simply invoke search in order to find information about publicly connected devices. 29, what toolkit allows operations to query records against DNS server? We can use DNS Python, which is a toolkit that allows us to look at DNS records, such as the A or quadruple A records, the MX records, depending on the type of services that you enable on that server. You can look at specific records to see the detail about that service for that is available in that network. 30. What security tool consists of a set of folders containing patterns of known attacks used in pen testing? That will be your FuzzDB, and in fuzzing, we go through the steps to be able to perform various assessments, and that could also include attack via applications or URL. 31. Which of the following statement is true? A, Shodan can be used by logging in to the web interface. B, RESTful API can be used with Shodan. C, programmability from Python using Shodan module, which requires an account in Shodan with developer Shodan key. I think we did this for the assignment. And D, install Shodan browser extension on Firefox or Chrome. So all of the statements are true. Shodan can be used via the web interface. You can create an account. You can also implement RESTful API. You can use Shodan module, and it would require for you to add your account information or your developer key. We've done this for the lab and the assignment. And then we can also install the extension for Shodan on other browser. So all of the statements are correct. On the test, however, you would have one option as the correct answer. So make sure that we know the details about Shodan. For 32, when you're using DNS Python toolkit and DNS resolver module, which the following statement is used to locate A and MX record from the server? And the best option that you can select from this list is going to be A, where you will create an object, and this is going to use the query and the resolve method. First, it needs to query the target domain, which is youtube.com in this case, and our record would be MX for Microsoft Exchange. That will be a mail server. And the second part to this is that we have a response IPv4 object. This is going to store the query and the resolution of the A record. An A record only pertains to version 4 IP address, where quadruple A would reference version 6 of the IP address. So A is the best option for number 32, as it uses the appropriate methods, which is query and resolve for those records. 33, which Python module is used to connect with the FTP server to execute commands on the server? So when we're working with FTP server to execute the command, we would use ftplib, which is a module in Python that we can implement for connection with FTP server and to be able to execute command like ping or download and so on. 34, refer to the below script and determine the statement that is used to download files from the FTP server. So here we are importing in ftplib library or module, and we're going to use the super class FTP. Then we have a function called write data. Here we would use descriptor.write that allows us to be able to write data to a file. Then we establish a client for the FTP connection, and our target will be the be.debian.org. We set up the client login by using client.login method there. Then we would have changed the directory to the current working directory. Once we navigate to the directory, we would use file descriptor object to be able to open the changelog 5.0. Then we are going to read the lines from that file and be able to write it to a file where it uses write data. And then after that, we would close and quit the connection. So the answer to this is that if you look at the statement FTP client dot RET are lines, this allows us to be able to retrieve the data and write it as a file. So that will be the statement for that script from number 34. 35, what type of encryption is used by SSH to provide confidentiality, authentication, and integrity when we transmit data? And it can use both symmetric and asymmetric encryption. And symmetric uses the same key to encrypt and decrypt, where asymmetric uses different keys to encrypt and decrypt. 36, which Python module supports SSH version 1 and SSH version 2 protocols, allowing clients to create and make connections to SSH server, and that will be your Paramigo. 37, when connecting to the remote host, commands can be ran using Paramigo module by invoking which method? And we would use exec command, which is a method that comes with the Paramigo module that allows us to execute command on that would be commands onto the actual target server. 38, when working with SSH server, which tool is used to extract large amount of data or large amount of information about the SSH configuration? We would use SSH audit. And in the notes, I provided the link for you to look at the tool. 39, when using Nmap, what type of scan is used to obtain information whether the target machine firewall is running? We would use the SA or the TCP ACK scan. This type of scan allows us to find information about the target machine firewall, whether it's turned on or running. 40, when using Nmap, what type of scans is used to detect open or closed ports by performing the most audits on the available ports? That will be your ST or TCP connect scan. This one does the most audits on the ports, so it's able to identify the open and closed port by going through the inventory of the available ports. Number 41, when using Nmap, which mode allows the system to scan on different ports simultaneously, and a callback function to be defined for execution when the scan is finished on a specific port? And that will be your asynchronous mode. This mode allows us to scan different ports simultaneously, whereas synchronous modes can only scan one port at a time. When it scans synchronously, one port is scanned, and once that's finished, it will proceed to the next port, which takes longer when we're performing a synchronous mode compared to asynchronous mode, where it would be able to scan that simultaneously. 42, true or false? Automatic scanners cannot test all types of vulnerabilities and can give false positive result, and that is true. We cannot rely on automatic scanners 100%. We can only assume that it would give us somewhat of a decent result, but not 100% accurate, knowing that we might have false positive, or in other cases, it might be the other way around. 43, fill in the blank. The blank software or scripts that take advantage of error, failure, or weakness can cause unwanted behavior in a system or application, allowing malicious user to force changes in execution flow. That is considered exploits. So exploits for number 43. 44, when assessing vulnerabilities, which group of vulnerabilities consists of characteristics that will change over time? which group of vulnerabilities has characteristics that are related to the user's environment? So to answer the first question, we would say that the temporal group has characteristics that will change over time, whereas environment group, for the second question, has characteristics that are related to the user's environment. And in the notes, we also went over base group along with other groups. So these two groups, make sure that we understand the difference for the final exam. And when you look at different CVEs or CVSS, you would find the details of the vulnerabilities that will fall under different groups. 45, to automate Nessus scan process, which Python module is used to interface the Nessus servers for vulnerability scanning using API. And we would use Sys module, and this module would only work if you have Nessus installed. Just like any type of module working with API, you got to make sure that the application is available for us to write a script to interface with the actual application. 46. What open source vulnerability scanning and management solution can be used to assist network system administrator in vulnerability identification and intrusion detection task? We would use OpenVAS or Open Vulnerability Assessment System. This can be used as an application, or we can implement Python module with the API. And in the lab, we have done this. 47, true or false. Code script sanitation and validation can reduce the vulnerability of program by preventing attackers to inject malicious script or code into the input field, and that's correct. It's recommended we sanitize and validate our programs to make sure that we reduce the risk of injection. 48, which Python module is used to store things that do not require database or temporal data by using binary protocols? And that will be your Pickle module. And Pickle is mentioned in this particular unit and also later on. However, there's also security challenges with some of these modules as well. So making sure that we understand that and be able to close out the security gap. 49, true or false. Validation and sanitation can be achieved by creating application filters for fair and safe input without jeopardizing application performance and response, and that is true. We should always want to implement these tasks to make sure that we set up filters so we can protect the actual application. 50, describe the purpose of the below Python script. In this script, we're using Pickle. We create a list called object list, and in it we have 3 strings, mastering Python security. We have a with open statement that is going to use Pickle. So here we're going to use Pickle to write data to a file, and we're going to use Pickle dump method or the dump method to put that onto our object list. So it's going to take the string and it's going to write that to the file. So here we simply serializing a list of objects into a file using Pickle. 51, refer to the below script and identify the statement that provides protection against the risk associated with typing commands in the shell. So here we're using a subprocess module. As we import that in on the first line, we have a method called ping secure, and we define that using the command arguments, which is a list. And in that list, we would have the command ping and -c, that will be your option for count, 1 as a value. So it's going to take that list and put it onto as a command for the target my server. And it's going to return the subprocess. It's going to return the command. And here we want to have shell faults. That's going to allow us to protect the security risk in the shell. So that particular statement returns subprocess p open command arguments, shell faults. That's going to allow us to protect the risks associated with piping command in shell. 52, true or false? When using subprocess module, command parameters are the most important areas as they validate the command to avoid vulnerabilities associated with the shell injection. This is false. Shell parameters are the most important areas as they validate the command to avoid vulnerabilities associated with shell injection, not command parameters, but shell parameters. 53, what type of Python module is used to escape input? And that will be your shlex module. 54, which Python module is used for analyzing static code by checking compliance? PEP8, refactor tracking tracking double code and other things such as all parameters that are accepted in Python. That will be your Pylint. We have used this in one of our lab when we did the static code analysis. So Pylint uses PEP8 for double tracking code, whereas dlint, which is number 55, is the Python module that is used for analyzing static code by checking against a set of rules, which is known as linters, to search for the indicator that allows security rules to be evaluated on base code. So dlint is using linters. 56, which Python module is used to execute arbitrary code to detect backdoor? And that will be your PyPy. 57, which Python module is widely used to detect DOS or denial of service attack? We would use URL lib3. 58, what component of Flask can be used to secure URL redirection? We simply use a decorator to trigger a route function, which consists of verification and sanitization of the redirection of URL. So that way we won't jeopardize the redirection where that can be redirected elsewhere. 59, how can cross-site scripting be prevented in web application using Flask? We would simply use sanitation and validation in Flask template to prevent cross-site scripting in web applications. 60, what type of system contains web application analysis tool? That will be your content management system, such as WordPress or Joomla or Drupal, other things. 61, what tool uses exploit database to look for vulnerability in CMS-enabled plugins? That will be your CMS map. Which of the following statement is true for 62? CMS is used to obtain vulnerability information pertaining to the users groups and administrative interface. B, CMS is used to identify outdated plugin and bad configuration, facilitate tasks such as session management, searches, shopping cart modules that are associated with the plugins. C, CMS is a software platform that allows the user to build, manage a website with limited technical knowledge and resources. D, CMS includes the front-end user interface that allows the user to make changes to website content without any knowledge of HTML, CSS, and any other programming language. E, CMS mainly consists of two elements: the content management application, CMA, and the content delivery application, CDA. And so all of these statements are correct. None of them are false. So we would say all of the above for this one. And then I forgot to mention F, by keeping CMS platform up to date and create regular schedule up to date or patch with CMS vulnerability, along with all the other components like install plugins and themes will reduce security risks, and that is also true. So for 62, all the statements are correct. Again, on the test, you won't have multiple answers. You would just have one option that is correct. So make sure that we understand all the options in number 62. 63, which Python module is used to detect SQL vulnerability or SQL vulnerability, and we'll use SQL map. 64, what type of attacks consist of exploiting the encryption algorithm that are used when the client tries to connect to the server securely using SSL/TLS protocol? And this would be the beast or browser exploit against SSL/TLS. So beast for number 64. 65, what type of attacks uses different compression techniques at the HTTP level to extract data that is encrypted using HTTPS protocol? And that is your breach or browser reconnaissance and exfiltration via adaptive compression of hypertext, which indicates the majority of the keywords from question 65. 66, what type of attacks exploits a vulnerability in a certain implementations of the SSL/TLS protocol that allows injection? And that will be your freak or factoring attack on RSA export keys. So make sure that we know these type of attacks, especially they are related to web applications and the web services. 67, what framework is used for extracting data from the disk image that is available in RAM? Volatility, and in the chapter where we talk about forensic, we touch on tools and framework, and this is one of them, volatility. 68, which of the following option is the lightweight database that does not require any servers to be installed or configured? And that will be your SQLite, or SQLite 3 is the latest version. So option C is the answer for 68. 69, when performing network forensic, what tool is used to visualize, what tool is used to visualize network diagram through network traffic capture? And that will be your PCAP X-rays. Now, we know that there are a lot of other tools for network sniffing, but PCAP X-ray allows us to perform network forensic with the visualization of network diagram after the traffic is captured, hence the name PCAP. 70, when performing forensic evaluation on a Windows PC, what Python module is used to access Windows registry to search for information or evidence? That will be your Python registry. 71, when using logging module, what component records the action during the execution of the program? And that will be your logger, because it has other component like handler, where logger is the component that records the action, which hence the log in the file. 72, describe the purpose of the below script. And here in this one, we are using logging module, where we import that in. And we have basic config is used to initialize the file handler, which is used to create file log, and then establish the debug mode for the logging. And with that, we would put in various message for debug, info, and warning. Those are just different categories of information in the log. So in this script, we simply generate a log file using file handler, and that log file is filehandler.log. 73, which Python module uses low-level cryptographic primitive that will be your PyCryptoDome. We spent a little bit of time on this in the assignment in the lab previously last week. And so PyCryptoDome is used at the low level. 74, when using AES encryption algorithm, what mode is used in block cipher and recommended for performance and hardware acceleration enhancement in the processor, allowing randomization of keys to improve encrypting two messages with the same key. And that will be your GCN. We talked about different mode from blockchain to various modes. So make sure that we know the modes. 75, when using AES, what technology prevents brute force attack against password-based key and reduce attack possibility? That will be your password-based key derivation function 2, your PBKDF2, which requires salting of the password, and that just delay the brute force process. It doesn't fully prevent it, but it just delays it. 76, fill in the blank. The blank is the art of hiding information, text, image, and other form of digital document, and that will be steganography. And we did a little bit of this in the lab as well. True or false? CryptoLib module in Python allows us to obtain hash of the password and make the hash attack difficult. That is incorrect, so it's false. We use hashlib. 78, which Python module includes both high-level recipes and low-level interfaces to common cryptographic algorithms, such as symmetric ciphers, message digest, key derivation functions, and that will be your cryptography module, which is different than the CryptoDome. Cryptography module is also different than crypto module, but they are similar. Right, cryptography, we did this in the lab where that allows you to operate with low and high level interfaces for encryption. 79, explain how the submodules of PyCryptoDome is used in the below script for AES encryption. And here we would see, we know that it's PyCryptoDome that uses crypto.cipher, and AES is symmetric, so AES is going to require same key to encrypt and decrypt. We also use crypto.random, and specifically we use getRandomBytes method from that submodule. Then we have a data object. This object is used to store a string, which is a byte size, and that will be your secret data. Our key, we would use the method that we pull from the submodule. And here we're going to generate 16 byte size key. Then for our cipher object, here we are going to use the key to be able to generate AES encryption using EAX mode. And with that, we are applying encryption and message digest to the data. So here, that's just going to store the constructor, or we construct the object cipher. And with that, we would be able to use that object to encrypt. Then we're going to output the file, and this file is going to be encrypted.bin. We write to the file, and then we would iterate through and be able to write everything as we would put. So this just opened the files, then we write to the file on the next line. Then we're going to close the file. So ultimately, we use getRandomBytes to generate random keys, and that came from the submodule that we saw we imported. Then we also use that key to encrypt the data, and we simply use crypto.cipher module, which is a submodule from CryptoDome, to output the encrypt the file and output the encrypted file. So you can see that this is used for encryption in multiple submodules we implemented as it is a process. Number 80, which is the last question, refer to the below script and describe the type of file that are generated, files that are generated from this script for our, say, encryption keys. So In this one, we would see that we are also using Cryptodome. We're using crypto.public key to import RSA. The first part, we can see from the comment here that we are using unguessable as a string. This is a passphrase that is used to generate for authentication to generate the key. And here we're using the RSA to generate 2048 as the length of our key. Once we have our key, we're going to export that key. And we are going to use that and store it in the encrypted key. So the protection of the key, we're going to use CBC or chain block mode to be able to protect that key. Then we're going to output a file that's going to contain the key information, and that is called the RSA key.bin. So once we do that, we then are going to display our public key and export it. So once we generate the public key, we print it and export it. Then we're going to go to the next step, which is now the private key. So our secret code is still the same. And we have an object called encoded key. We are going to now use the object to open the RSA.key.bin file, read it, and we're going to use that file in order to generate the private key. So we're going to import in the key in order to generate the key with the secret code, which is unguessable. We're going to print the public key and export it. After we generate the public key, we're going to store it. So we're going to store it as the receiver.pen. And for the private key, we're going to store it as the private.pen. So in this section, it actually export the key and write to the file and then close. Okay, for both keys. So the answer for this is ultimately we generate a key and we put that key information in RSA key bin to generate the public key. We use that bin file to generate the public key, and then we're going to output that public key as the receiver.pen. Then we are going to create the private key and generate the private key and then store that private key as the private.pen. So you can see that this is for asymmetric encryption or the PKI infrastructure, public key infrastructure for encryption. So that would wrap up 80 questions for the final review. And I hope that this helps you cover the majority of the topics that we cover in this class. The questions that you're going to see are going to be 50 on the final exam. It's multiple choice. I will open the final during the finals week. And it will close on the Wednesday evening of the final week. So you do have a few days to complete the final exam. And so make sure that we go through our notes, our assignments, our final review, and even our lab. As you can see that some of the questions and the script come from our lab exercises as well. And thank you for watching this video. I hope that I help you review for CIS30C, Unit 1 through 14. And hope to see you later.